If you're already dead, then what use is the world around me? And this is a point that he tries to make. And he brings a statement of two very famous scholars, right? Hassan al-Basri and Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. And they're both basically, it's a way that they're praising each other. They said, I really enjoy how you look at and how you view the world around you, and you walk through it as if you are already past. And the reason is because if we look at this life as a journey, the end of this journey is our death, right? That if this portion. But our ultimate goal and our ultimate destination is where? Is the akhirah. And if we understand that our ultimate destination is the akhirah, what portion of the journey, so if we look at the journey as a whole, what portion of the journey is in this world and what portion of the journey is in the next? If I had to compare it, would it be like 50-50? No. What is it going to be like? Right, like it's like 1 in 99, right? So if we're looking at this world in comparison, if we look at the entire thing, like that's this world. And the rest of the journey is supposed to be in the akhirah. So if a person is already invested, is already living in the akhirah, how is he going to view this world and view, like, how much is he going to care about how people view him? Like very little, right? He's not going to view the value of what people give him and how they deal with him or what kind of status that he has. Why? Because who has a need? Remember, we were talking about needs. Who has a need of wealth and status? The living. But if you're dead, you have no need for those things. And it's really interesting the perception that they had to that they took on. And again, because the focus is on the consequences. And if we understand, and how he had mentioned before, and how he speaks about in the previous discussions, status and wealth, these two things are tools. They're just tools. And if we use those tools appropriately, where can they take us? Right, they can take us to a better akhirah. If I use my wealth in a good way, what's going to happen? It's going to benefit me. If I use my status in a good way, it's going to benefit me. If I can use my status to speak up against oppression, if I can use my status to help others, if I can use my status to help people get into certain jobs, right? There's so many things that we can do with wealth and status, and there's so many means that we can utilize so that we can better ourselves and help others. So he says here that the person who holds status in high regard, he actually has very limited vision. Right? Because remember, when we talked about the whole, our entire existence, a very small portion of this existence is this world, and the rest of the existence is the next. So if I have short visioned, then my view is going to be limited here. But if I have basira, if I actually have been given insight and blessed from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where's my vision going to be? It's going to be in the next world. And he says that. He says that if we understand that that vision is limited, then our goal should be to break through that limit and actually view the akhirah and view the next world as our ultimate goal. Because if my goal is this world, what am I going to try to do? Right, get as much of this world as I can. Right? If my goal, if I think that this world is paradise, I'm going to try and make this world paradise and the best that it can be. But if my goal is the next, then how much investment am I going to have here? Very little. He brings a couple ayat which are very appropriate for the discussion. He says, بل تؤثرون الحياة الدنيا والآخرة خير وأبقى. He says, yet you prefer the life of this world, even though the hereafter is better and more lasting. And then he Azza wa Jal, he says, كلا بل تحبون العاجلة وتذرون الآخرة. That truly you love this fleeting world and neglect the life to come. Here, he Azza wa Jal is talking about our natures. Why is it so easy to get caught up in this world? Because it's made to be a distraction. It's made to be a distraction, and it's a very good distraction. Right? It's a very good distraction, and the reason is because we're experiencing it. Raise your hands if you experienced the akhirah. Right? None of us have. None of us has experienced the ayah. So here, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he talks about the akhirah, it sounds like an amazing place. It sounds like the food and the land and the peace and living forever, right? These are all amazing promises that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us. But what is the problem? We've never We've never seen it. We've never experienced it. So when we have experiences around us, it becomes very easy, like you said, to be distracted in those things because it's immediate. And even if we look at the fundamental traits and characteristics that we should have as Muslims, part of it is this idea of delayed gratification. Okay, I'm not going to do this now because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving me XYZ in the akhirah. Right? That's part of being patient. That's part of understanding, that's part of being content. Then he says, so how else do we understand status? He says that according to the immediate harms that they bring. So over here, again, he's talking about mindset. We're talking about the cure. How do you deal with it? So he says when it comes to status, is that basically the higher status a person has, what happens? He creates more enemies. And why is that? Right. Jealous, right? Jealousy is it's a very innate human trait. And the higher the status a person has, the more people there are that are jealous of him. And this is something that's real. And if we understand that I'm in a position that is constantly at risk, what am I naturally going to do? If I know that 10 people want what I have, what am I going to do? I'm going to protect it. Yeah, that's exactly what he says. The more I have, the more I want to protect it. And he says that protecting status is like building a house on the waves, or like a house of cards that we call it, right? Or building a house or a castle in the sky. There are a lot of different amthal or different ideas that we have that are very cross-cultural. But this idea, why do you think he talked about building on waves? And what's interesting about waves? Right? They're destructive, for sure. What else? Do they? Huh? They keep coming, right? It never moves. And he says, and such are the whims of the people. Right? When he talks about waves, such are the whims of the people, meaning that we also what? We also sway, right? Like the waves. If there's something that we like or something that we enjoy, what happens? We start drifting in that direction. And then all of a sudden we'll see something else that we enjoy. What happens? We'll start drifting in that direction. Huh? Or we see something that we don't like. We'll try to drift away from that. Because human beings we're very fickle by nature. Sometimes there are things that we like, sometimes there are things that we dislike, and we try to always draw toward those things that we enjoy. And he says, what makes you think and what makes you believe that you can build on this? Right? This structure that you see in front of you, right? Because you're trying to build status, right? That's what he's essentially saying. You're trying to build status, but you're trying to build status on something that it itself is not firm. It itself is not grounded. It's something that's constantly changing. And the problem with that is if I do things because I know people like them, is it necessary that the people will like it tomorrow? No. So what am I going to do? I have to change according to whatever it is that today. And this is part of the danger of that. So he says that there are two cures. One is through knowledge and one is through actions. He says, so the cure from the knowledge perspective is to not pay attention to this world. Knowingly, right? So the stuff that we spoke about, understanding the harms that are behind it, understanding the perspective that we should have. He said this knowledge should help cap. Remember we were talking about the two caps that bring down the love of status? He said this knowledge should help bring one cap, right? Bring one half. Love what other people seek or that they want. So the things that they like is that we do. And those are the actions that we act on. Why? Because the more things that we do that they like, the more acceptance we get. And he says, but what action should I do? What action should I work on? I should do those things that the people are critical of. So he says, do the opposite. Don't do things that people actually dislike. So if people dislike it, those are the things you should be doing. And he says the reason for that is because then people will start turning away from you. And as you become accustomed to people turning away, what happens? You care less and less about their acceptance. And instead of their acceptance, whose acceptance do you start seeking? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes. Hmm. Like contrarian? Oh, so it is tricky, right? Because even if I do contrarian things, is it possible that there are a group of people that enjoy those contrarian things, right? So now, what have I done? Instead of connecting with this group, I've managed to connect this, and I still guess what I still enjoy. I'm enjoying the same thing. It's just a different group of people now. So he actually talks about some of the things that are universally not enjoyed, and it's a really interesting take. But he says basically we're all part of different societies, right? We're all part of different societies, cultures. We're all part of different groups, different communities, and it's important for us because if we're actively doing this, that means that I have to have a personal sense of awareness of what's going on around me, and not just that. The second thing that's happening is like I actually have to be part of the community, right? If I don't know what the community likes or dislikes, does it matter the things that I do? No, because I don't have an awareness of that. And the fundamental piece of advice that I think is important for every single one of us as Muslims, one of them for sure is being part of a community. Right? This is something that's fundamentally important for every single one of us. Being part of a community. And what else should I have as a Muslim? If I'm part of a community, that's good. What else? Having access to a scholar, having access to a sheikh. Because through this, I can get communal support, and through this, I can get spiritual support. And these are the two fundamental needs of every single human being. Right? I need to be around other people because it is through those other people that I'll learn how to deal. I can learn how to act. I can learn what is socially acceptable and what is not socially acceptable. I can learn how to speak. I can learn how to set boundaries. And these are very important human skills that every single one of us needs. But does that always give me religious boundaries? Does that help me with halal and haram? No. So who do I go to? At that point, I need to have a relationship with the sheikh. And I'm not talking about like, you don't need to be best friends, but you need to have access. You have to be able to question him, like when I have a question or I need to know something. So this idea of acceptance and how it switches to Allah because we get used and accustomed to not pleasing people, that's something that's really important. And he said that this shouldn't be understood, right? He's basically saying that, listen, I'm not giving you a green light to commit sin, right? He's like, this is not, don't misunderstand, don't try to twist my words. I'm not giving you a green light to commit sin. This is something that will be disliked, right? Cheating people, does anybody like being cheated or being known as a cheater? No, right? This is something that will actually get you turned away from people. But is that an acceptable means? No. He's saying this is not what I mean. This is not what I intend. Because the more haram we do, what happens to our iman? It gets weaker and weaker, and we've completely defeated the purpose at that point. Uh, so he brings a couple statements here, a couple narrations. He says it's narrated that some kings sought advice from ascetics, yani the zuhad, or the people who avoided like worldliness. When they realized their proximity, the kings invited them for a meal and began to eat their own flesh, praising the food extravagantly. Yani meaning that they sat down and they were eating the food and they were talking about how amazing this food is. And when the ascetic or the zahid looked at the king, he vanished from his sight and left. And the Zahid said, praise be to Allah who turned you away from me. Some have also consumed a lawful drink in a cup that resembles the color of wine, creating the impression that they are drinking wine. This makes people think that they are drinking wine, so they disappear from people's eyes. So these are some extreme examples of how to um, take criticism or be in positions where we are criticized by others or disliked by others. And it's important to keep the goal in mind when we talk about some of these narrations, because some of them are a bit off-putting, some of them are a bit weird or strange. The goal isn't to actually do this, right? These are meant to be extreme examples of how to avoid getting into the public eye and how to avoid being noticed. Because the goal is to be, and he'll talk about it, inshallah. And you know what? I don't want to get there too quickly. So, and he justifies it. He has a little bit of like, he talks about, oh, technically this is halal, so if you do this thing, yeah, just don't do it. Like these are things that will for many situations it'll cause more problems than actually allowing us to achieve the goal that we're working for. Um, Again, another example, like they would dress up and enter a bathhouse, and because they wanted to make people think one thing about them, but they weren't actually that thing. To what extent how this is applied, I think his other strategies, which he talks about here, these are actually more effective. So those are one way, and I think being contrarian to whatever it is the public likes, and there are easy ways to do that. There are easy ways to do that. If there's a certain fashion trend, don't catch on, like, what I mean, don't wear that trend. Don't get caught up in the hype. That's a very easy way. Certain cars, right? Certain presentations. Um, just don't speak like everyone. There might be certain words, that are used. Don't use those words. It's important to set a personal standard for these things. But the one strategy that he mentions here I really like is this idea of a personal retreat, right? This idea of uzla, right? This idea of like being in secluding oneself, like in a khanqa, right? Like being alone. Why is that important? He says because once an individual is alone, what can I do when I'm alone that I can't do around others? I can think, right? I can actually think clearly. If I don't have any distractions around me and I'm sitting alone, it helps me reflect. He says, and I'm actually in a situation now where I'm unknown. Right? Before, I might have had one or two people know me, but if I'm sitting in this space, then I'm actually unknown. And when I'm sitting in that space where I'm actually unknown, it can help me judge my heart. Because remember, the idea is reflection. The idea is removing these feelings from my heart. So he says here that it gives me an opportunity to reflect. It gives me an opportunity to react to myself. All of a sudden, if I start missing those things, what have I found out about myself? That I still have a love of status. And there's no way I would have known this had I not been alone and spent time with myself. This is why these retreats are important. This is why it's important to get away. This is why it's important to go places where nobody knows me. I might be used to the attention, or I might used to people coming and talking to me or offering me things. But if I go to a space where nobody knows me, all of a sudden I can now tell in my heart, was that something I actually wanted, or is it something that hasn't affected me yet? So he says that one of the biggest signs for one of status, and I thought this was very insightful. He says expectations. And I was actually sitting and thinking about it. That why is that such a problem? What expectations from others? Why is that a bad thing? Right? I mean, you'll be for sure. Most of the time, if I have expectations from others, most of the time I'm going to be disappointed. I don't doubt that. What else? I'm sorry. That's not bad, right? Like we want things from each other, and I don't. I think that's completely healthy and reasonable. Hmm. Why do I deserve whatever it is that I'm thinking? Right? What is my expectation? Is it perfect? It's entitlement. It's exactly what it is. Entitled meaning that I deserve this. I deserve this attention. I deserve this praise. I deserve these gifts. Right? I deserve the way that they're dealing with me. That's what expectations are. And it's a huge sign of arrogance. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. But it's like I said, the way he frames it, it's actually really nice. The way that he frames it and the way he talks about it, it's like, okay, well, and we need to ask ourselves, well, he should have. Well, okay, why? Why should he have? Right? or she was supposed to. Why was she supposed to? For what? And does this mean that we shouldn't do things for others? No, right? That's not what it means at all. Right? So if if in my home I'm working and I'm supposed to take care of the bills and things at home, can I just not go to work one day? Right? You can't just do that, right? And if there's something that has been set in motion, right? If my wife is like, okay, well the bills will be taken care of and the rent will be paid and all those things, is that a bad thing? No, but there's also precedent for it, right? And if I don't expect it, how does my attitude change? I mean, I'm still going to do what I do, but I'm saying for her, how is her attitude going to change? If she doesn't expect that, every day there's electricity, how's she going to feel? Or if I come home and she cooks every day, for example, and I don't expect there to be food at home. Not only will I be surprised, I'll be what? I'll be happy. It's amazing. Well, it's amazing. And not only will I be happy, I'll also be what? I'll be grateful. So there are baselines that we have everyone has a right to, right? So respect is a mutual right, right? There's no doubt. Even the Prophet ﷺ, he said that the rights of a mu'min on another are six, right? These are rights. So am I expected those rights? Absolutely, right? Because these are religious rights that are given. But there are certain things that are outside of those religious rights. And the lower our expectations are, we will find with ourselves, the happier and more grateful that we are as individuals. Because in the more expectations I have, and we really should reflect on this ourselves, the more expectations I have from others, and the more I get disappointed, what happens to me? Huh? I become more toxic, right? I become a more toxic person because I find that time and time and time and time and time and time again, what's happening? Right? Nothing's getting done. It's like, oh, well, it's supposed to be like this and it's supposed to be like that, and you're supposed to do this, you're supposed to do that. In the other space that I can have expectations is if I have a contractual agreement with someone. Yes? Right? I can't have a mechanic. I can't go in and be like, "Oh man, he fixed my car." Right? Like that's a contractual agreement that I have with him. Or I can't go to a restaurant and order food and then the waiter just never brings it out. And I ask like, "Hey, what's going on with my food?" It's like, "Hey, you should lower your expectations." Right? Right? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, sure. So like here, any relationship basically that I don't have a there are expectations I can have from a religious baseline, right? So mutual respect, for example. This is something that is across the board, across faiths, right? It doesn't matter. From every human being, I deserve to be respected. There's no doubt about that. I deserve not to be abused. There's no doubt about that. With another Muslim, if I sneeze, I have a right to expect what? For him to make dua for me, right? If I have a janazah, I have a right for at least some people in the community to attend, right? These are expectations, baseline expectations that everyone has a right to. The other set of expectations are the contractual expectations we have from each other. If I make a contract, if I make an agreement with you that, hey, I will give you X amount of money to do this, he has every right to expect the full payment. Unfortunately, what happens in a lot of our transactions, it's like we agreed on 6,000. It's like, yeah, come on, man. Like after the work is done, just give me a discount. It's like this is not the time to negotiate discounts. We already agreed on the price, right? So he has every right to expect every single penny, and I have every right to expect the work being completed. So in those contractual agreements, it's completely fine. Outside of these spaces, then I shouldn't. Outside of these spaces, I definitely shouldn't, because like I said, I should try to put all my expectations where? With Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Ideally, that's what I should try to do. If I have all these expectations, I should try to put them with Allah Azza wa Jal. So he goes on the way, okay, well, what's the best way to break those expectations? He said, by being content. It sounds simple, right? of being content. And we had spent a lot of time talking about what qana'a is and what being content means. But that's his simple solution. He said, listen, you don't want to expect other things from other people, then I need to be what? Subhanallah. It's not. He doesn't say, okay, or well, other people, you need to change your group, or you need to be around people who are better, or blah, blah. What does he say? And it is even this is something that is even from Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. I have to change. If I want to remove expectations and I want to fix my relationships, who's the one that needs to change? Me. Right? It's more practical. It's easier, right? You can't. And not just that. If I go around trying to change people, how many of those people are going to appreciate it? Like zero, right? No one is going to appreciate that. And this is why personal qana, and this is why being content is so important. Because when I'm happy, it will allow me to deal with people in a much better way, in a much better place, in a much better space. He says, and this is the true path to independence. And there's no doubt about that. I agree with this 100%. Qana'a and being self-sufficient, being happy with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me, understanding how to use those tools and setting my own personal boundaries, this is the best way and the most ideal way of achieving what true happiness is. Does it mean I have a lot of stuff? No. Doesn't mean I have a lot of wealth or a lot of status. It doesn't mean any of those things. It means that whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me, I'm what? I'm pleased with it and I'm happy with it. And if I have true contentment, am I going to strive for more, or am I just going to stay there? I'm going to strive for more. Or that is part of being content. Being content that an individual will continue striving for more. He's not going to fall back and going to get lazy. So he closes by saying that one can seek assistance in this from reports that denounce the pursuit of status and commend laziness and humility. For example, the saying, a believer is never devoid of humility, scarcity, or ailment. Meaning good and bad things happen to believers, right? There's no doubt about that. And he goes on to say, by examining the lives of the Salaf and their preference for humility over honor and their inclination toward the rewards of the hereafter, one can find many valuable lessons. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with them all. Radiallahu anhum ajma'een. Ameen. So this is what he closes out with. He's like, listen, just because you're content and just because you've figured out the knowledge and action and how to cap this idea of self-love, this idea of a love of status, does it mean that bad things will stop happening to you? No. Those things will still happen. But what will change? My attitude toward them. No. Follow. I'm sorry? Conviction. Conviction is more yaqeen, right? Conviction is more yaqeen. And it's important to have that too, because yaqeen will bolster my contentment. Why? Because I know for sure that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will continue providing for me. I know for sure that whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me is meant to be what I receive and how much I receive, and I will be able to navigate with this amount. So the yaqeen definitely has a role in it for sure, but it is different conceptually from content and qana. Any other questions? No? Close. I will see you guys next week inshallah. Wallahu a'lam. Wa sallallahu ala khayri khalqin. Nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.